A ghost is history demanding to be remembered. So I think that people are so interested in ghosts because I think they like to be scared. I think that sometimes, like for some people, it's related to loved ones who may have passed, and they want to know that there is another like realm that you go to, that there is another side. I think it's different for everybody. I think it's like some people they want to prove that there is life after death. For me, it's just it was a way to talk about history. So why would Boston be so haunted? I think it dates back to the 1600s. I think Boston has a history that is so old. You know, there was the American Revolution was huge in this area. This is where like there was the Boston Massacre that's going to leave a psychic imprint. Boston Tea Party, history that dates back more than 300 years in our backyard, coming up on 400 years. And so I just think that there's so much history there. And things that's interesting about Boston, it was a peninsula, so it was a small. So the Boston Common was waterfront property. So the water came all the way up to the Boston Common. They would do the executions in the Boston Common and then dump the bodies in the water. Boston Common, why is it so haunted? It's a dead man's dumping ground. There's bodies everywhere. There is a lot of activity, especially around what was the Great Elm. And the Great Elm was known as the hanging tree back for many years. And when the hanging tree is kind of similar to the gallows, they would hang people for various crimes, ranging from stealing a squirrel to witchcraft. And a lot of people know the Salem witch trials for their witch trials history. That's my specialty as far as local history. But there's 3 women that were executed in the Boston Common at the Great Elm. And so the tree is no longer there. People expect that the tree is there, but it fell down in the late 1800s. And when it fell down, it was such an iconic tree that people gathered around from the Boston Common to get a piece of it. So there's pieces of that tree in local families who kind of came when it fell down during a nor'easter. 3 of the people that were executed that we know for sure were 3 women accused of witchcraft over a 60-year period. There was Ann Hibbins, who was not a witch, but she was a witch with a B. She was not liked by the locals, and they targeted her for witchcraft. I think her charges were a cow died in Connecticut, and they blamed her for being a witch. The ground that goes from the Boston Common all the way to the waterfront, that's the haunted corridor. That's where there's been almost 400 years of history that psychically imprinted itself on that location.
I'd have to say the biggest one is shadow figures. You know, you're sitting there and out of the corner of your eye you see something and you're like, what was that? You know, or did you hear that? Usually don't see like a full body apparition. It's usually a shadow figure. Sometimes you'll hear voices. Sometimes you'll put down your keys. 5 minutes later, they're not there anymore. How'd they end up in the kitchen? Well, you got yourself a little poltergeist.
I think Boston's ghosts are kind of sleepy, so they're historic ghosts. And a lot of the spirits in Boston, I would say, are more residual in nature.
In Boston, it's definitely revolutionary soldiers that people see. And with all the burial grounds that are in Boston, and, you know, God only knows what's underneath all those buildings and what's underneath Boston Common. You know, there are crypts underneath there. You know, you don't know what led to their death. You don't know if that's where they lived. There's a lot that's residual haunting. When people tell me that they've going through Boston Common that they've seen stuff, I believe them. You know, I did not see them, so I can't say, oh yeah, you know, but they saw them. And they are upset that they saw them and don't understand. But if you look up the location, you're like, well, that makes sense.
I feel like a lot of the ghostly activity in that area is tied to. There was a major gas line explosion that happened March 4th, 1897. And this is right when they were building the Boylston Street T-stop. I would give tours in the Boston Common, also give photos on those tours of what looked like nooses hanging from trees or orbs. And there's one photo that came about 5 years ago from the tour, what looked like a little girl looking at a gravestone on one of my tours at Central Burying Ground. So I think that was probably the most recent for me. A lot of people believe in ghosts, and myself included. So I came in as a skeptic. I'm gonna like debunk all these stories, and as I went along, I actually had more and more experiences as I was going along. So now I'm a full-blown believer.